The fluorescent lights in Dr. Sloane's waiting room buzzed like angry wasps, casting that sickly yellow glow that made everyone look like they were fading of liver disease. I sat in one of those uncomfortable chairs that therapists must order in bulk from some catalog of human misery, watching the minute hand crawl toward 3 o'clock. Marlene sat across from me, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping against her phone screen, probably texting her gym buddies about her latest CrossFit achievement or complaining about having to waste an hour on marriage counseling. "This is such bullshit, Landon," she muttered without looking up. "We both know this isn't going to fix anything." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I studied my wife of 12 years. At 37, Marlene Pierce still turned heads at the grocery store. Her auburn hair was pulled back in that effortless ponytail that probably took her 20 minutes to perfect, and her athletic wear clung to curves that she'd maintained through religious devotion to her physical therapy clinic's gym. She looked like the kind of woman who'd never had a bad day in her life, which was almost true if you didn't count the bad days she'd given everyone else. "Maybe not," I said, keeping my voice level. "But your mother insisted, remember? Said we owed it to ourselves to try professional help before we threw in the towel." Marlene's green eyes flashed with irritation. "My mother says a lot of things. Doesn't mean I have to listen to all of them." The door to Dr. Sloane's office opened, and our marriage counselor appeared. Dr. Patricia Sloane was in her 50s, with graying hair and the kind of patient smile that probably took years of graduate school to perfect. She wore a beige cardigan that looked like it had seen better decades and sensible shoes that squeaked slightly on the linoleum. "Landon, Marlene, please come in," she said, gesturing toward her office. The office was exactly what you'd expect from a marriage counselor who'd been practicing since the Clinton administration. Diplomas on the walls, a box of tissues strategically placed on the coffee table between two facing couches, and one of those white noise machines humming in the corner to mask the sound of relationships falling apart. We took our usual positions on opposite ends of the couch, the space between us growing wider with each session. Dr. Sloane settled into her chair and opened her notebook. "So," she began, "last week we talked about communication patterns. Marlene, you mentioned feeling unheard in the relationship. Landon, you expressed frustration about feeling criticized. How has this week been?" Marlene shifted on the couch, crossing her legs. "Same as always. Landon comes home from his computer job, sits in that basement office of his until dinner, eats without saying much, then goes back downstairs to play with his gadgets. It's like living with a ghost." "I work in cybersecurity," I corrected quietly. "And those gadgets pay for your BMW and your monthly spa visits." "See?" Marlene turned to Dr. Sloane. "Everything's about money with him. Never about connection, never about intimacy." Dr. Sloane nodded thoughtfully. "Intimacy is certainly important in a marriage. Can you both talk about what that means to you?" I felt a familiar knot forming in my stomach. These sessions always seemed to circle back to our private life, or lack thereof. Marlene had been pulling away physically for months, claiming she was too tired or too stressed or too whatever. I'd stopped initiating anything weeks ago, tired of the rejection. "Intimacy means feeling desired," Marlene said, her voice taking on that sharp edge it got when she was building up to something. "It means having a partner who makes an effort, who doesn't just go through the motions." "And what does that look like for you, Marlene?" Dr. Sloane asked. Marlene was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her weighing her words. There was something in her expression, a kind of cruel satisfaction that made my chest tighten. "Honestly," she said, turning to look directly at me, "he's so pathetic in bed that I had to get a lover." The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Dr. Sloane's pen stopped moving across her notepad. The white noise machine seemed to get louder, filling the sudden silence with its electronic hiss. I felt my face go numb, that strange, disconnected feeling you get right before the pain hits. 12 years of marriage, and she'd just gutted me in front of a stranger with the casual tone she might use to order coffee. "Marlene," Dr. Sloane said carefully, "that's a significant disclosure. How long has this been going on?" Marlene shrugged, not taking her eyes off me. 6 months, maybe 7. His name is Brent, and he actually knows how to make a woman feel like a woman. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, watching my wife's face. She was enjoying this. The slight upturn of her lips, the way she tilted her head like she was delivering good news instead of detonating our marriage in front of a therapist who probably made $50 an hour to witness this kind of carnage. "Landon," Dr. Sloane said gently, "how are you feeling right now?" How was I feeling? Like I'd been hit by a truck driven by someone I'd trusted with my life, like the last 12 years had been a lie, like the woman sitting 3 feet away from me was a stranger wearing my wife's face, but what I said was, "Noted." Marlene blinked, clearly expecting more of a reaction. "That's it? That's all you have to say?" I looked at her for a long moment, memorizing her face, the way her eyebrows drew together when she was confused, the small scar on her chin from when she'd fallen off her bike in college, the freckle just above her left eyebrow that she always covered with makeup. "What would you like me to say, Marlene?" "I don't know, something. Anything. Fight for me, get angry, show me you actually care." I stood up slowly, smoothing down my shirt. "Dr. Sloane, thank you for your time. I think we're done here." "Landon, please sit down," the therapist said. "This is exactly the kind of moment where we can work through—" "No," I said quietly. "We really can't." I walked to the door, my hand on the handle, and turned back to look at Marlene one last time. She was staring at me with something that might have been panic, like she was just now realizing what she'd done. "Enjoy your lover," I said. "I hope he's worth it." The door closed behind me with a soft click that sounded like the end of everything. I sat in my Honda Civic in the parking lot for 20 minutes, watching people come and go from the medical building. A woman with a crying baby, an elderly man with a walker, a teenager with his arm in a sling. Normal people dealing with normal problems, not sitting in their car trying to process the fact that their marriage had just been murdered by the person who'd promised to love them. My phone buzzed, a text from Marlene. "We need to talk when you get home." I deleted it without responding and pulled up another contact. Leah Sanderson, the lawyer who'd handled the closing on our house 3 years ago. She'd given me her card and told me to call if I ever needed anything. I'd never imagined I'd need a divorce attorney. "Leah, it's Landon Pierce. We need to talk. Tonight." Leah Sanderson's law office was in one of those converted Victorian houses downtown, the kind with creaky floors and rooms that had been carved up into offices that were too small for modern furniture. She met me at the door at 8 o'clock sharp, looking like she'd been expecting this call for years. "Landon," she said, shaking my hand with a grip that could crack walnuts. "I'm sorry you're here, but I'm glad you called me." Leah was in her early 40s, with short blonde hair and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that came from years as a prosecutor before she'd gone into private practice. She wore a dark suit that was all business, and carried herself like someone who'd never lost a fight. She cared about winning. Her office was small but efficient, with law books lining the walls and a desk that looked like it had survived several decades of legal battles. She poured 2 cups of coffee from a pot that had probably been brewing since noon and gestured for me to sit. "So," she said, settling behind her desk, "tell me what happened." I gave her the abbreviated version. 12 years of marriage, growing apart, marriage counseling, and then the bomb Marlene had dropped in Dr. Sloane's office. Leah listened without interrupting, taking notes in a legal pad with handwriting that looked like it could cut glass. 6 to 7 months, she said when I finished. "That's not a brief affair. That's a relationship." That's what I figured. "Do you know who he is? This Brent?" Not yet. But I will. Leah raised an eyebrow. Landon, I need to be clear about something. Whatever you're thinking about doing, run it by me first. Divorce can get ugly, and if you do something stupid, it can cost you everything. I nodded. I'm not going to do anything illegal. Good. But there's a difference between legal and smart. Remember that. She flipped to a fresh page in her notepad. Now, let's talk assets. House, cars, bank accounts, retirement funds, debts. We spent the next hour going through the financial anatomy of my marriage. The house was worth about $400,000, with $200,000 left on the mortgage. We had joint checking and savings accounts with about $80,000 total. My 401k had about $250,000. Hers had maybe $60,000. 2 car payments, some credit card debt, the usual middle-class American financial portfolio. Oregon is an equitable distribution state, Leah explained. That means the court tries to divide assets fairly, not necessarily equally. The affair could work in your favor, especially if she spent marital funds on her lover. How would I prove that? Bank records, credit card statements, phone records if you can get them legally. She leaned back in her chair. You work in cybersecurity, right? You probably know more about digital forensics than most people. I did. In fact, I knew a lot more than Marlene probably realized. When you spend your days protecting companies from hackers and data thieves, you learn things about digital privacy and security that most people never consider, like how most people use the same password for multiple accounts, or how location services on phones create detailed records of where you've been and when, or how deleted text messages aren't really deleted until they're overwritten. I might be able to find some things, I said carefully. Just remember what I said about running things by me first. Leah closed her notepad. I'm going to start drafting divorce papers. Oregon has a 90-day waiting period, so even if we file tomorrow, it won't be final until early next year. That gives us time to build a case. What about her staying in the house? That's tricky. You're both on the deed and the mortgage. I can ask for temporary exclusive use and possession, but you'd need grounds. Has she been threatening or abusive? No, just cruel. Leah's expression softened slightly. I know this is hard, Landon, but cruelty isn't grounds for kicking someone out of their own house. Yet. I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, past houses with warm lights in the windows and families settling in for the evening. Normal families with normal problems. I wondered how many of those houses contained marriages that were held together by nothing more than habit and shared mortgage payments. Our house was dark, except for the porch light and the blue glow of the television in the living room. Marlene's BMW was in the driveway, parked at an angle like she'd been in a hurry. I pulled into the garage and sat in the car for a moment, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. The house felt different when I walked in. Not physically different, but emotionally charged, like the air before a thunderstorm. Marlene was on the couch in her pajamas, a glass of wine in her hand, and some reality show on the TV. She looked up when I came in, her face uncertain. We need to talk, she said, muting the television. Do we? Landon, I know what I said today was harsh, but what, Marlene? You thought I'd just pretend it didn't happen? She set down her wine glass and turned to face me fully. I thought it might wake you up, make you realize what we're losing. What we're losing. I kept my voice level, but something cold was spreading through my chest. You've been sleeping with another man for 6 months, and you think this is about what we're losing. She flinched at the profanity. I rarely swore, especially not at her. It's not about him. It's about us, about how disconnected we've become. So you decided to connect with someone else instead of talking to your husband. I tried talking to you. You're never here, even when you're here. You live in that basement office like it's your own private world. I looked around our living room, the furniture we'd picked out together when we'd first bought the house, the wedding photos on the mantel, The throw pillows Marlene had insisted on buying because they tied the room together. It all looked like props in a play I'd never auditioned for. "What's his last name?" I asked. "What?" "Brent. What's his last name?" Marlene's face went pale. "Why does that matter?" "It matters to me." She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her trying to decide how much truth she was willing to give me. "Collier. Brent Collier. What does he do?" "He's a pharmaceutical rep. He calls on the clinic sometimes." Of course he did. I could picture it now. Some smooth-talking salesman in an expensive suit, charming the physical therapists and office staff, paying special attention to the attractive married woman who owned the practice. It was such a cliché it almost hurt. "How long has this been going on, really?" "I told you, 6 months." "Marlene." She looked away. "Maybe 8. I don't know exactly when it started. It wasn't planned. But you kept planning it, for 8 months. It's not like that." "Then what is it like? Explain it to me." She picked up her wine glass again, taking a sip before answering. "He makes me feel alive. When I'm with him, I remember who I used to be before I became just your wife." The words hit me like a physical blow. Just your wife, like being married to me had somehow diminished her, turned her into something less than she was meant to be. "I see," I said quietly. "Do you? Do you really see? Because I've been trying to get your attention for years, Landon. I've been fading inside this marriage, and you've been too busy with your computers to notice." I nodded slowly, like I was finally understanding something that had been explained to me many times. "You're right." She blinked, clearly surprised by my agreement. "I am?" "Yes. You've been fading inside this marriage, so I think the best thing for both of us is to end it." The color drained from her face completely. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want a divorce, Marlene. I'm saying I'm done." "You don't mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life." She stood up abruptly, wine sloshing in her glass. "You can't just give up like this. We can work through this. People have affairs, Landon. It doesn't have to end everything." "It does for me." "What about counseling? What about fighting for us?" I looked at her for a long moment, this woman I'd loved for 12 years, who'd just told me she'd been fading inside our marriage while sleeping with a pharmaceutical rep in whatever hotel rooms and back seats and spare bedrooms had been convenient for them. "You already made your choice," I said. "Now I'm making mine." I walked toward the stairs, but her voice stopped me. "If you leave me, you'll regret it. You'll never find anyone else who'll put up with your shit." I turned back to look at her one last time. She was standing in the middle of our living room in her pink pajamas, holding a glass of wine like a weapon, her face twisted with something between desperation and rage. "Maybe not," I said, "but I'd rather be alone than be with someone who thinks being married to me is a form of passing." I went upstairs to the guest bedroom and locked the door behind me. Then I sat on the bed with my laptop and began the process of learning everything there was to know about Brent Collier. By 3 in the morning, I knew more about Brent Collier than his own mother probably did. The internet is a beautiful thing when you know how to use it, and 20 years in cybersecurity had taught me exactly where to look for the information people think they've hidden. Brent was 42, divorced 3 years ago, lived in a condo downtown that he was apparently behind on payments for based on some public records I'd found. He worked for MedTech Solutions, a pharmaceutical supply company that serviced physical therapy clinics throughout the Pacific Northwest. His LinkedIn profile was full of the usual corporate buzzwords about building relationships and exceeding expectations. His Facebook was mostly gym selfies and motivational quotes about living your best life. But the interesting stuff was in the details. Credit reports showed he was leveraging himself to the hilt, with maxed-out credit cards and a car payment on a BMW that was probably more than my mortgage. His divorce records, available through the county clerk's office, painted a picture of a man who'd cheated on his ex-wife with at least 2 other women, before she'd finally had enough. Most interesting of all were his travel records. As a pharmaceutical rep, Brent's expenses were probably reimbursed by his company, which meant there would be a paper trail of every hotel room, every restaurant, every business trip he'd taken in the last 8 months, including the ones with my wife. I made a list of dates and locations, cross-referencing them with Marlene's calendar and credit card statements. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. Weekend continuing education seminars that didn't exist, dinners at expensive restaurants on nights when she'd told me she was working late, hotel charges on our joint credit card that she'd explained away as work conferences. The most damning evidence was in her phone records. I had access to our family plan account, which meant I could see every call and text message timestamp, if not the content. The pattern of communication with Brent's number was like a roadmap of their relationship. Tentative at first, then frequent, then constant. Late-night calls that lasted hours, text message exchanges that went on throughout the day. By the time the sun came up, I had a complete dossier on my wife's affair and the man she'd been having it with. But information was just the first step. Now I needed to decide what to do with it. I made coffee and sat in the kitchen, listening to Marlene moving around upstairs. She'd be getting ready for work soon, probably hoping that last night's conversation had been some kind of temporary insanity that we could move past. She had no idea that her world was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. She came downstairs at 7:30, dressed in her usual work attire of athletic wear that managed to be both professional and flattering. She moved carefully around the kitchen, like she was trying not to wake a sleeping tiger. "Good morning," she said quietly, pouring herself coffee. "Morning. Did you sleep at all?" "Some." She sat across from me at the kitchen table, wrapping her hands around her mug like she was trying to warm herself. "Landon, about last night. I called a lawyer," I said. Her face went white. "You what?" "Leah Sanderson. She's drafting divorce papers." Marlene set down her coffee with shaking hands. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. But we haven't even tried to work through this. One conversation and you're ready to throw away 12 years? I looked at her across the table, this woman who'd shared my bed and my life and my dreams for more than a decade, who'd been systematically betraying me for 8 months while I'd been completely oblivious. "You threw it away, Marlene. I'm just acknowledging what you already did." "That's not fair." "Fair?" I laughed, and the sound was harsh even to my own ears. "You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been you telling me you were unhappy before you started sleeping with someone else. Fair would have been you asking for a divorce before you made me look like an idiot in front of a marriage counselor." She flinched at each word, like I was slapping her. I never meant for it to happen this way. But it did happen this way, and now we deal with the consequences. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face in a way that might have moved me 24 hours ago. Now it just looked like another manipulation, another way to avoid taking responsibility for what she'd done. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "I want you to move out." "This is my house too." "Then I'll move out. I don't care, but I can't live with you anymore." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her carefully applied makeup. "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't know. Maybe Brent has room at his place." The words hit her like a physical blow, and for a moment I felt something that might have been satisfaction. She'd humiliated me in the worst possible way, and now she was getting a taste of what that felt like. "You're being cruel," she said. "I'm being honest. There's a difference." She stood up abruptly, grabbing her purse and keys from the counter. "I can't do this right now. I have to go to work." "Have a good day," I said. "Tell Brent I said hello." She slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I waited until I heard her car pull out of the driveway, then went upstairs to our bedroom and began the process of packing my things. If she wanted to stay in the house, fine. I'd find somewhere else to live until the divorce was final. but I wasn't going to spend another night under the same roof as her. It took me 3 hours to pack everything that mattered to me: clothes, personal items, my computer equipment, some books. The rest was just stuff, furniture and decorations, and accumulated junk from 12 years of marriage. She could have all of it. I was loading the last box into my car when my phone rang. Marlene. "What did you do?" she said without preamble. "What are you talking about?" "My credit cards. They're not working." I'd been wondering when she'd discover that. "I closed the joint accounts." "You can't do that." "Actually, I can. They were joint accounts, which means either of us could close them. I moved my direct deposit to a new account this morning." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long, I thought she might have hung up. When she spoke again, her voice was shaking with rage. "You bastard! You're trying to control me." "I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. I need those accounts for the business." "Then you should have thought of that before you decided to spend marital funds on your boyfriend." Another long silence. How did I, what, Marlene? How did I find out about the hotel rooms, the expensive dinners, the weekend trips that weren't actually business conferences?" I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, quick and shallow, like she was having a panic attack. "You had no right to spy on me. I had every right to look at my own credit card statements and phone records. You want privacy for your affair? Pay for it yourself." "Landon, please. You're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared. You have no idea what I'm capable of when someone betrays me." I hung up before she could respond and finished loading my car. I had a hotel room reserved downtown, and I had work to do. The real revenge was just getting started. The extended stay hotel on Morrison wasn't exactly the Ritz, but it had Wi-Fi, a kitchenette, and most importantly, it wasn't the house I'd shared with Marlene for 3 years. I set up my laptop on the small dining table and got to work. First priority was Brent Collier's employer. MedTech Solutions had a website full of corporate speak about integrity and professionalism, with a code of conduct that specifically prohibited inappropriate relationships with clients or their staff. I downloaded their employee handbook and ethics policies, highlighting the relevant sections. Then I crafted an anonymous email to their human resources department. Nothing accusatory, just a concerned citizen reporting that one of their pharmaceutical reps might be engaging in inappropriate relationships with clients. I included dates, locations, and just enough detail to make it clear this wasn't some random complaint. I sent it from a throwaway email account through a VPN, completely untraceable. My phone rang while I was researching Oregon's adultery laws. Big Mike Patterson, my old college roommate who now worked as a bouncer at Flanagan's, the sports bar where I'd been drowning my sorrows twice a week for the past month. "Landon, buddy, you sound like shit," he said by way of greeting. "I feel like shit. Want to talk about it?" Mike was one of those rare friends who'd stuck around after college, through career changes and marriages and all the other things that usually drive people apart. He was 6'4", 250 pounds of former college football player who now spent his evenings keeping drunk assholes from starting fights in a downtown sports bar. He was also one of the most loyal people I'd ever known. "Can you meet me for lunch?" I asked. "Sure. Flanagan's?" "Perfect." Flanagan's at noon on a Tuesday was mostly empty except for a few regulars nursing beers and watching SportsCenter. Mike was behind the bar, polishing glasses with the kind of methodical attention that came from years of bartending muscle memory. "You look like hell," he said when I walked in. "Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear." He poured me a beer without asking and leaned against the bar. "So what's going on? And don't tell me it's work stress. I've seen you handle work stress." I gave him the abbreviated version. The marriage counseling session, the affair, the divorce proceedings. Mike listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. "Jesus Christ," he said when I finished. "What a snake." That's one way to put it. "So, what are you going to do about it?" "What do you mean?" Mike looked at me like I was being deliberately stupid. I mean, what are you going to do about it? You can't just let her get away with humiliating you like that. I'm divorcing her. That's what I'm doing about it. That's not enough. I took a long pull of my beer, thinking about the anonymous email I'd sent to MedTech Solutions that morning. What would you suggest? I'd suggest that Mr. Brent Collier needs to understand that there are consequences for sleeping with another man's wife. Mike, nothing illegal, he said quickly. But there are ways to make someone's life unpleasant without breaking any laws. I studied my friend's face. Mike had always been protective of the people he cared about, sometimes to a fault. In college, he'd put 2 guys in the hospital for jumping me outside a bar, and he'd never shown a moment's remorse about it. What did you have in mind? Leave that to me. You focus on the legal stuff. I'll handle the extracurricular activities. That afternoon, I drove to Marlene's clinic for the first time in months. Pacific Northwest Physical Therapy was in a strip mall between a Starbucks and a dry cleaner, all glass and chrome and motivational posters about overcoming obstacles. I parked across the street and waited. At 4:30, a silver BMW pulled into the parking lot. Not Marlene's BMW. This one was newer, more expensive. The man who got out was exactly what I'd expected from his Facebook photos. Tall, lean, with the kind of artificial tan that came from spending too much money at a tanning salon. He wore a suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month and carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. Brent Collier walked into my wife's clinic like he owned the place. I sat in my car for 2 hours, watching the clinic's parking lot. Brent's BMW stayed put while other cars came and went. The clinic closed at 6, but his car was still there at 6:30. At 7, Marlene's BMW pulled out of the lot, followed 30 seconds later by Brent's. They were heading to the Marriott downtown. I followed at a distance, feeling like a character in one of those detective movies where the private investigator tails the cheating spouse to get evidence for the divorce. Except, this wasn't a movie, and the cheating spouse was my wife. I didn't follow them into the hotel. I didn't need to see what happened next. Instead, I drove back to my hotel room and made a phone call to Leah Sanderson. I have evidence, I said when she answered. What kind of evidence? The kind that proves she's been spending marital funds on her affair. Hotel rooms, dinners, weekend trips, all paid for with our joint credit cards. That's good, Landon. That's very good. How did you get it? I have access to our credit card statements and phone records. Everything I found is completely legal. Perfect. Email me everything you have. This is going to make our case much stronger. After I hung up, I sat on the hotel bed and stared at the ceiling. 24 hours ago, I'd been a married man trying to save his relationship through counseling. Now I was living in a hotel, gathering evidence for a divorce, and planning revenge against my wife and her lover. It should have felt worse than it did. My phone buzzed with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. This is Tina, Marlene's friend. We need to talk. Tina Rodriguez was Marlene's best friend since college, a woman I'd never particularly liked but had tolerated for the sake of my marriage. She was one of those people who thrived on drama and gossip, always stirring the pot and then acting surprised when things boiled over. I texted back, "About what?" "About what you're doing to Marlene. This is crazy, Landon. You can't just destroy her life because you're hurt." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm responding to what she already destroyed. She made a mistake. People make mistakes. 8 months isn't a mistake, it's a choice." My phone rang. Tina. "Landon, please. She's my best friend. She's falling apart." She should have thought of that before she decided to sleep with a pharmaceutical rep. Don't be crude. Don't be naive. She humiliated me in front of a marriage counselor, Tina. She told a stranger that I was so pathetic in bed that she had to get a lover. How exactly am I supposed to respond to that? Silence on the other end of the line. She didn't mean it like that. Tina said finally. How did she mean it? She was just trying to get your attention, to make you fight for her. Well, she got my attention, just not the way she wanted. Landon, please, just talk to her. Give her a chance to explain. She had 12 years to explain. She chose to explain it to Brent Collier instead. I hung up and turned off my phone. I was done taking calls from Marlene's friends and family members who wanted to convince me that I was overreacting to my wife's affair. I was done being reasonable and understanding and willing to work things out. From now on, I was going to be something I'd never been before, ruthless. The call from Mike came at 8 in the morning, 3 days after our conversation at Flanagan's. It's done, he said without preamble. What's done? Your boy Brent had a little car trouble last night. I sat up in the hotel bed, instantly awake. What kind of car trouble? The kind that happens when someone takes a tire iron to your headlights and side mirrors. Also, someone might have poured sugar in his gas tank. Terrible shame, really. Crime is getting so bad downtown. Mike, relax. No cameras, no witnesses, no way to trace it back to anyone. Just a random act of vandalism in a parking garage. Happens all the time. I should have been upset. I should have told Mike he'd gone too far, that property damage wasn't the answer. Instead, I felt a cold satisfaction spreading through my chest. Did you leave anything? Just a note under his windshield wiper. Homewreckers park elsewhere. I thought it had a nice touch. My phone started ringing before I could respond. Marlene. Did you do this? She said without preamble. Do what? Don't play dumb with me, Landon. Someone trashed Brent's car last night. He thinks you had something to do with it. Why would I care about Brent's car? Because you're trying to punish me by going after him. Marlene, I've been staying in a hotel for 3 days. I have no idea what happened to your boyfriend's car, and frankly, I don't care. He's not my boyfriend. What is he then? Silence. That's what I thought, I said. Is there anything else? The divorce papers came yesterday. Good. I hope you have a lawyer because mine is very thorough. Landon, please. Can we just meet somewhere and talk? Without lawyers, without anyone else? Just us? What's left to talk about? Everything. Our marriage, our future, what we both want. I know what I want. I want a divorce. You don't mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life. She was crying now. I could hear it in her voice. I love you, Landon. I know I messed up, but I love you. You love me? You've been sleeping with another man for 8 months, and you love me? It wasn't about love. It was about feeling alive, feeling desired. It didn't mean anything. It meant everything to me. It doesn't have to. We can get past this. People do it all the time. Maybe they do. But I'm not people, Marlene. I'm me, and I don't forgive betrayal. I hung up and immediately called Leah Sanderson. How fast can we move on this divorce? I asked. What's the hurry? She's starting to panic. I want to file before she has time to hide assets or come up with some strategy to drag this out. We can file today if you want. But Landon, are you sure about this? Once we file, it becomes public record. There's no taking it back. I'm sure. All right. Meet me at my office at 10. Bring your checkbook. At 11:30, I was officially a man seeking divorce from his wife of 12 years on grounds of adultery and irreconcilable differences. The papers would be served to Marlene at her clinic that afternoon by a process server who'd probably seen this same drama play out hundreds of times before. I drove to Flanagan's for lunch and found Mike restocking the bar for the evening crowd. How's the war going? He asked. We just fired the opening shot. Good. What's next? I'm not sure yet, but I have some ideas. Mike grinned, and for a moment he looked like the college kid who'd once put 2 guys in the hospital for messing with his friend. Let me know if you need any help with those ideas. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done in 12 years of marriage. I went through Marlene's personal belongings. Not the obvious stuff like her dresser or jewelry box, But the places where people hide things they don't want found. The shoebox in the back of her closet, the folder of papers in her desk drawer, the external hard drive she kept in her nightstand. What I found was worse than I'd expected. The external hard drive contained hundreds of photos and videos that Marlene had taken with Brent over the past 8 months. Hotel rooms, restaurants, weekend trips to places I'd never been invited. There were intimate photos that made my stomach turn, and videos that I deleted without watching more than a few seconds. But the worst part wasn't the private content. It was the happiness on her face in every single image. She looked radiant, alive, genuinely joyful in a way I hadn't seen her look in years, maybe ever. In the shoebox, I found receipts for things she'd bought for him. Expensive cologne, a watch, clothes, all paid for with our joint credit cards, all purchased while she was telling me we needed to cut back on expenses. The folder in her desk contained printouts of emails between her and Brent, going back 10 months. The early ones were professional, discussing pharmaceutical supplies for her clinic, but they quickly became personal, then flirtatious, then explicit. I read enough to understand the timeline of their relationship before I had to stop. The most damaging document was a printout of an email Marlene had sent to Brent just 2 weeks ago. "I can't wait to be free of this marriage. Elle is so boring and predictable. You make me feel like the woman I was meant to be." I photographed everything with my phone, uploaded it to a secure cloud storage account, and then put everything back exactly where I'd found it. Evidence for the divorce proceedings, but also something more personal. Proof that the woman I'd loved for 12 years had been living a completely different life behind my back. My phone rang as I was leaving the house. Tina again. "Landon, what the hell is wrong with you?" "Good afternoon to you too, Tina." Marlene got served with divorce papers at her clinic today, in front of her employees and patients. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was for her? About as humiliating as being told in front of a marriage counselor that you're so pathetic in bed that your wife had to get a lover? That's different. How is it different? She was trying to save your marriage. You're trying to destroy it. No, Tina. She destroyed it 8 months ago when she started sleeping with Brent Collier. I'm just cleaning up the mess. You're being vindictive. I'm being honest. There's a difference. She wants to fight for your marriage. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I thought about the photos on the external hard drive, the receipts in the shoebox, the email about how boring and predictable I was. No, I said. It doesn't mean anything to me at all. You're going to regret this, Landon. Someday you're going to realize what you threw away, and it'll be too late. Maybe, but I'd rather regret ending it than regret staying in it. That evening, I sat in my hotel room and made a list of everything Marlene and Brent had cost me. Not just financially, though, that was substantial, but emotionally, socially, professionally. The humiliation of knowing that people would find out about the affair. The loss of friends who would inevitably choose sides. The damage to my reputation in a community where I'd lived and worked for over a decade. By the time I finished the list, it covered 3 pages of hotel stationery, and I was just getting started. Tomorrow, I was going to start evening the score. The anonymous tip to MedTech Solutions bore fruit faster than I'd expected. By Thursday morning, Brent Collier was suspended pending an internal investigation into his inappropriate relationship with a client. By Friday afternoon, he was fired. I knew this because Marlene called me, screaming. "You destroyed his career," she shouted into the phone. "He lost his job because of you." "I didn't destroy anything," I said calmly. "I just made sure his employer knew he was violating their ethics policies." "How did you even know where he worked?" It's amazing what you can learn about someone when you actually pay attention. "You're ruining his life." He should have thought about that before he started sleeping with married women. "Landon, please. This has gone far enough. You're hurting innocent people." I laughed, and the sound was harsh even to my own ears. "Innocent?" "Marlene, he's been screwing my wife for 8 months. In what universe is that innocent?" "He didn't know our marriage was in trouble. I never told him. Bullshit. He knew exactly what he was doing, just like you did. She was crying now. That same manipulative sobbing that had worked on me for 12 years. What do you want from me? What will it take for you to stop this? I want you to sign the divorce papers without contesting them. I want you to take your share of the assets and disappear from my life. And I want you to stop pretending you're the victim in this situation. I can't do that. Then things are going to get much worse for both of you. I wasn't bluffing. Over the weekend, I'd done more research into Brent's background and discovered some interesting information about his previous job. He'd been fired from his last pharmaceutical company for falsifying expense reports, something that hadn't shown up in the initial background check, but was discoverable if you knew where to look. I compiled a dossier of Brent's employment history, his financial problems, his pattern of infidelity, and his recent termination from MedTech Solutions. Then I created a professional-looking document that I titled Background Investigation, Brent Collier, and began sending it anonymously to every pharmaceutical company in the Pacific Northwest. By Tuesday, Brent's prospects for finding another job in his field had essentially evaporated. But the real masterstroke came when I discovered that Marlene had been using our joint business credit card to pay for some of her activities with Brent. As the primary account holder for the business, I had the right to dispute those charges as unauthorized personal use. I called the credit card company and reported approximately $12,000 in fraudulent charges dating back 8 months. Hotel rooms, dinners, weekend trips, gifts, all purchased by someone who wasn't authorized to use the card for personal expenses. The credit card company froze Marlene's access to the account pending their investigation and demanded immediate repayment of the disputed charges. Since she'd already been cut off from our other joint accounts, she had no way to pay. Wednesday morning, she showed up at my hotel. I opened the door to find her standing in the hallway, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes were wrinkled, and her eyes were red from crying. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. "No." "Landon, please, we need to talk." "We have nothing to talk about. The credit card company is saying I committed fraud. They want $12,000 I don't have. That's unfortunate. You know I didn't commit fraud. Those were legitimate business expenses." "Hotel rooms with your boyfriend were business expenses?" She looked away. "Some of those charges were legitimate." "Then you should be able to provide business justification for all of them. Receipts, meeting agendas, educational materials. I'm sure the credit card company would love to see your documentation." Her face went pale. "You know I don't have that." "Then I guess you have a problem. This is extortion. This is consequences. There's a difference." She leaned against the door frame like she was having trouble standing. "What do you want from me, Landon? Just tell me what you want and I'll do it. I want you to sign the divorce papers, without contesting anything, accept the settlement offer and walk away." "I can't do that. I'll lose everything." "You should have thought of that 8 months ago. Please, I'm begging you. I'll end it with Brent. I'll do whatever you want. Just stop this." I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who'd been the center of my world for 12 years, who was now standing in a hotel hallway begging me to stop destroying the life she'd built on lies and betrayal. "It's too late for that," I said quietly. "You made your choice. Now live with it." I closed the door and listened to her crying in the hallway for 10 minutes before she finally left. That evening, Mike called with an update. "Your boy Brent tried to get a job at Northwest Medical Supply," he said. Turns out they'd already received some interesting information about his background. Funny how word gets around in a small industry. Funny how that works. He's also having some financial problems. Apparently, someone reported his BMW as possibly being purchased with fraudulent loan information. The bank is asking some uncomfortable questions. I hadn't done that, but I didn't correct Mike's assumption. Sounds like he's having a run of bad luck. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. Oh, and I heard through the grapevine that he's been staying at the Motel 6 on McLaughlin since his landlord evicted him for non-payment of rent. The Motel 6? That's a step down from the Marriott. Way down. But I guess pharmaceutical reps don't make as much money as people think. Friday afternoon, Leah Sanderson called with news. Marlene's lawyer wants to meet, she said. They're ready to discuss settlement terms. What kind of terms? Close to what we originally proposed. She gets the house, you get your retirement accounts and the business assets. Alimony is off the table completely. What changed her mind? I think her lawyer explained the reality of her situation. Fighting this divorce is going to cost her more than she can afford, especially with her current financial problems, and the evidence we have makes it very unlikely she'd get a favorable ruling from a judge. So we're done? We're done. I'll have the final papers ready for signature early next week. That night, I went to Flanagan's to celebrate with Mike. The bar was busy with the usual Friday night crowd, but Mike found time to pour me a beer and listen to my update. So that's it? He asked. It's over? It's over. How do you feel? I thought about that question. How did I feel? Not happy, exactly, not satisfied, but something else. Something I hadn't felt in months. Free, I said finally. Good. You deserve better than what she gave you. Maybe. Or maybe I just deserve the truth, whatever that looks like. Mike nodded and moved down the bar to serve another customer. I sat there nursing my beer and watching the crowd, thinking about the last 2 weeks and everything that had happened since that moment in Dr. Sloane's office, when Marlene had casually destroyed our marriage. I'd learned things about myself I'd never known, that I could be ruthless when someone betrayed me, that I could be patient and methodical in my revenge, that I could destroy someone's life as efficiently as I'd once tried to build a life with them. It should have bothered me more than it did. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. You win. I hope you're happy. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. On Monday morning, I signed the divorce papers in Leah Sanderson's office. Marlene had already signed them over the weekend, her lawyer told us. She hadn't contested anything. What happens now? I asked. Now we wait for the judge to sign off on the agreement. Should be final within 30 days. And then? And then you're a free man. I drove through the city after leaving Leah's office, past the clinic where Marlene worked, past the house we'd shared, past all the places that had been part of my married life. I felt like a tourist in my own history, looking at locations that had once meant everything to me and now felt like exhibits in a museum of someone else's life. That afternoon, I got a call from a real estate agent about a house I'd looked at the previous week. A small place in the hills outside the city, with a view of the mountains and enough land for a garden. A place where I could start over, build something new from the wreckage of everything I'd lost. The seller accepted your offer, she said. Congratulations. I hung up and sat in my hotel room, looking out the window at the city below. Somewhere out there, Marlene was probably trying to figure out how to rebuild her life after losing her marriage, her financial security, and her lover's career in the span of 2 weeks. Somewhere out there, Brent Collier was probably wondering how his life had gone from pharmaceutical sales rep with a company car to unemployed and living in a motel. I should have felt guilty about that. I should have felt some remorse for the systematic way I'd dismantled their lives in response to their betrayal. But I didn't. What I felt was something I hadn't experienced in years, the possibility of happiness. Not the desperate, clinging happiness of trying to save a fading marriage, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I'd stood up for myself when it mattered most. I'd been pathetic in bed, according to my ex-wife. I'd been boring and predictable. I'd been so inadequate as a husband that she'd had to find excitement elsewhere. Maybe all of that was true, but I'd also been underestimated. And that had been their biggest mistake. 3 weeks later, I moved into my new house. It was smaller than the one I'd shared with Marlene, but it was mine completely. No shared mortgage, no joint ownership, no memories of a marriage that had died slowly and then all at once. I was planting tomatoes in the backyard when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Dr. Sloane's office. "Mr. Pierce, this is Dr. Sloane. I wanted to follow up on your last session." "There's nothing to follow up on, Dr. Sloane. We're divorced." "I know. Marlene told me. I was calling because I wanted to apologize." "For what?" "For not handling that session better. What she said to you was cruel and inappropriate, and I should have intervened." I stopped digging and leaned on my shovel, looking out at the mountains in the distance. "It's fine, Dr. Sloane. In a way, I'm grateful she said it." "Grateful?" "It showed me who she really was, and more importantly, it showed me who I really am." There was a long pause. "And who are you, Mr. Pierce?" I smiled, though she couldn't see it through the phone. "I'm someone who doesn't forgive betrayal, and I'm someone you don't want to underestimate." "I see. Do you? Because I'm not sure Marlene ever did. Right up until the end, she thought she could manipulate me, control me, make me accept whatever scraps of respect she was willing to give me. She thought I was pathetic. And now? Now she knows better." After I hung up, I went back to planting my garden. The soil was rich and dark, perfect for growing things. In a few months, I'd have fresh tomatoes, peppers, herbs, everything I needed to feed myself from my own land. It was a good metaphor for starting over. You clear away the weeds, plant new seeds, and tend them carefully until they grow into something worth harvesting. I was looking forward to the harvest. 6 months later, I ran into Tina at the grocery store. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me, like she wasn't sure whether to acknowledge me or pretend we'd never met. "Hello, Tina," I said pleasantly. "Landon, hi." "How's Marlene doing?" Tina's face tightened. "She's managing. She had to sell the house. She's renting a small apartment downtown now." "And Brent?" "They're not together anymore. He moved back east somewhere. Couldn't find work here." "That's unfortunate." Tina stared at me for a long moment, like she was trying to figure out if I was being sincere or sarcastic. "You really destroyed her life, you know." "No, Tina. She destroyed her own life. I just refused to let her destroy mine in the process." "She loved you." "Maybe. But not enough to be faithful to me. Not enough to respect me. Not enough to be honest with me." "People make mistakes, Landon. And people face consequences for those mistakes. That's how the world works." Tina shook her head and walked away without another word. I finished my shopping and drove home to my house in the hills, where I had a garden to tend and a life to live that belonged entirely to me. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a beer and watched the sun set over the mountains. My phone was silent. My calendar was my own. My bank accounts were secure. My retirement was intact, and my future was whatever I chose to make it. It had been exactly 1 year since that therapy session where Marlene had told a stranger that I was so pathetic in bed that she'd had to get a lover. 1 year since she'd tried to humiliate me into fighting for a marriage that she'd already destroyed. She'd wanted me to fight for her. Instead, I'd fought for myself, and I'd won. Some people might call what I did cruel. Others might call it justice. I called it self-respect. Marlene had taught me an important lesson in that therapist's office. That sometimes the people who claim to love you are the ones who'll hurt you the most. But I'd taught her something too. I'd taught her that pathetic men don't systematically dismantle your life with the precision of a cybersecurity expert who knows exactly where to find your vulnerabilities. I'd taught her that boring men don't orchestrate revenge campaigns that leave you unemployed, financially ruined, and socially humiliated. I taught her that predictable men don't surprise you with the depth of their capacity for calculated retribution when you betray them. Most importantly, I'd taught her that some people, when you push them far enough, will push back harder than you ever imagined possible. She'd called me pathetic. She'd mocked me in front of a stranger. She'd thrown away 12 years of marriage for 8 months of excitement with a pharmaceutical rep who couldn't even keep his own life together. In the end, She'd gotten exactly what she'd asked for. Freedom from a boring, predictable, pathetic husband. I'd gotten something better. Freedom from a wife who'd never deserved me in the first place. The sun disappeared behind the mountains, and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Tomorrow I'd wake up in my own house, tend my own garden, and live my own life according to my own rules. It was exactly the life I'd always wanted. I just never realized it until someone tried to take it away from me. Marlene had wanted excitement. She'd gotten annihilation. And me? I'd just gotten started.